The way our food is produced is more environmentally intensive than ever before. For example, there are over 47 kinds of chemicals and pesticides used to grow our apples. Since the third agricultural revolution, and especially the Green Revolution, pesticides and chemicals are now routinely used in the production of our food. Although having more food is great, the negatives may outweigh them. Agribusinesses commonly practice commercial farming, which is only focused on increasing crop yields. Because of this, these so-called agribusinesses commonly use chemicals, pesticides, and unethical practices. These practices are not only harmful for our health, but also for our global ecosystem.
The current mass production of food, meat particularly, is destroying our farmlands and polluting our environments, ruining our arable land. From ranch to dinner table, 1 pound of beef requires and pollutes 1,800 to 2,500 gallons of water, along with 12 pounds of grain and 35 pounds of topsoil. 1 pound of grain takes roughly 200 gallons of water and significantly less space. If everyone could eat less meat and luxury crops and focus more on grain crops, we would save up to 1/3 of our planet's resources annually. Every minute, the equivalent of 7 football fields are bulldozed to make room for grain production and ranching for animals only. A modern feedlot can release several million gallons of waste into the environment every year. A cow on average releases 70 to 120 kilograms of methane per year. Methane is a greenhouse gas like CO2, but it's over 20 times worse for the environment. With billions of cows, this is a serious crisis. That is the status of the crisis currently, but how did it start? In factory farming, which has been common in more industrialized countries since the Industrial Revolution, food has been made into a Fordist style of production, where one person after another does simple labor to prepare the food and ship it. This type of high-volume slaughter started in the early 1900s, but it was popularized in the 50s, when the new grain and animal nourishment developments made it possible to have feedlots. Now, in the early 21st century, factory farms have been growing and multiplying faster than ever. There are 20% more animals crammed into the same factory farms now than there were 20 years ago. This means that there is and will be much more waste to deal with as long as factory farms keep growing at this rate. Factory farms developed with technology and will continue to spread and grow with it too. To demonstrate our point, we're going to give you a real-life example of what the end of the production chain looks like. Let's go. You see this 1 pound bag of chicken? This is the result of hundreds of hours and over 2,000 gallons of fossil fuels used in industrial feedlots filled with animal cruelty just to get a cheap product to your door. This product costs the equivalent of almost 10 pounds of grain and is damaging to the environment in ways that make it not worth it. Tasty. This looks delicious. Makes me want some chicken Alfredo. I wonder where this chicken comes from and what it's done to the environment. Let's see. Jerry, put it up.
Alakazam.
Do you know what this is? If you'd guessed dirty swimming pool, you'd be wrong. This is a waste pit from a factory farm, filled to the brim with blood and feces from many slaughtered animals. This is just one of many ways of how factory farms pollute our environment. The EPA estimates that around 75% of pollution problems in bodies of water located in the United States are from runoff from factory farms. Also, factory farms on average use 2,300 gallons of fossil fuels per day.
Hey John, I'm feeling hungry.
Hi, Jerry.
You want some pork chops?
I would love some pork chops.
Let's take a look here. Tasty bone-in pork chops. Good deal too, look. It's only $4 for these two big boys. I wonder what it takes to make this pork chop.
Let's find
Let's
out.
take a look.
This 1 pound of pork chops requires 2,000 of these big Crystal Geyser 1 gallon jugs of water.
Wow.
2,000. Not 200, not 20, not 2, but 2,000. That's a lot of water for a little packet of meat. Let's see how much grain it takes to make this pork chop.
it takes this plus this plus this plus this. All this grain, that's 25 pounds to produce these two small chops.
In the future, it is projected that this issue will get nothing but worse unless dramatic actions are taken. The UN and similar groups all have set targets on reducing global emissions and reducing damages to our natural habitats. Unfortunately, money talks. Big corporations controlling much of the world's wealth will also have a massive influence in this industry. It is unknown what will happen because we can't predict the future, but even if it sounds a little cynical, our guess would be that this issue will get nothing but worse and will continue to hurt the planet until drastic actions are taken. And they will have to be taken. It is projected that there will be around 4 billion cows in the world by 2050, and with emissions and waste from factory farms, this shows a very grim fate for our environment until we are forced to make a change or sleep in the bed that we've made.
Factory farms and industrialized crop farms make up a large part of our formal economy nowadays, and cheap animal and grain production is deeply rooted in our economy. Let's look at the modern side of the damage from factory farms and industrialized crop farming. Advocates for earth-polluting pesticides argue how increasing crop yields they believe can end world hunger. But some will argue that that's not even remotely close to the case. Large corporations often patent their own GMOs and pesticides so that no one else other than licensed farmers can use their products. An article from The Guardian reveals to us a real-life example of this. The country of Chad ranks amongst the worst of the periphery countries and barely ranks at stage 2 of the demographic transition model. Countries that are in a very similar situation to Chad often share problems such as hunger and poverty. Because of this, modern infrastructure in agriculture is poor, and companies in the production of pesticides and GMOs shy away from these poor countries that are unable to afford their products. Another article from The Guardian shows how vegetative agriculture in northwestern African countries like Algeria are in fact not lacking in the production of food, and in fact produces food in a much more environmentally friendly way. Traditional African farmers use the practice of natural breeding of seed crops to produce tastier, larger, and more resistant and bountiful crops. Compared to the chemically fertilized farms and slaughterhouses which generate dangerous runoff, this is much more safe and environmentally friendly because GMOs have been known to accidentally harm other organisms vital to the surrounding ecosystem, not to mention the fact that seed breeding is much more sustainable than genetically modified organisms. In this current age of environmentally damaging farming practices, countries like Algeria do well in the agricultural department. Now look at this in contrast to the United States. The economy of the U.S. is completely driven by the idea of gaining as much capital as possible, as we are a capitalist country. And one way to do that is by selling cheap goods. This is why we have such a huge amount of factory farms here. We have over 2 million large-scale farms in the United States alone. The U.S. is an example of a chief perpetrator of commercial animal and plant farming, with no disdain for the environment. This problem of factory farming is that it creates waste and damages the environment, which is something that affects everyone, because we're all on this planet together.
After research, we have found a viable solution to the environmental damage caused by factory farms and industrialized agriculture. At Oxford Martin School, researchers found that consuming more plant-based products and only cutting down meat consumption to a recommended level within health guidelines would make a huge impact on greenhouse gases, prevent further environmental pollution, and prevent desertification. Adhering to health guidelines on meat consumption could possibly cut global food-related emissions by a third by 2050, while a global adoption of a mostly vegetarian diet would bring down emissions by over 60%, along with increasing global food security. By eating less meat, factory meat production will be slowed and many will have to be closed. In the United States, the average daily meat consumption was over twice the rest of the world, with 26% of all meat just being wasted. Just by cutting down food waste and only purchasing enough meat that we really need to eat, we can help preserve our environment. If the world, and the United States in particular, could cut down on meat and become more environmentally aware, we could prevent the damage from factory farms. and help the world in ways that not only benefit ourselves, but our children. If you would like to help the planet with this extremely tough issue, please buy your meat from a local quality farm and buy as little meat as possible from factory farms such as Tyson.